Individuation for Adult Replacement Children is what I called the book, and the subtitle is Ways of Coming into Being. Because when one is born as a child to replace another child or other person, one is not oneself, and one needs to find a way to become oneself again. I want to start with a definition. The definition used to be a narrow definition: a child conceived in order to replace a child that has disappeared. But that is too narrow a definition according to the cases I have seen and some of the other researchers. So the concept is being expanded to include, yes, a child conceived, yes, a child born, but also adopted children, or in a much larger sense, someone who is given the role to replace a sibling or other human being. And for this I'm indebted to a colleague of ours, Henry Abramovich, with whom I discussed this for the last 20 years. So when the role in life, the place in life is attributed to another human being, already we may have a replacing situation. It can also be a surviving twin or a surviving of a multiple. It can be a child who is conceived following fertility treatment, where some embryos, some are chosen and others are discarded or frozen. It can be after a stillbirth, it can be after an abortion, after a miscarriage. So it is affecting very, very many people, and many people who do not know it, who may unconsciously suffer from this condition. You may say, well, human beings have always been born in the wake of somebody else dying. This is a condition, a human condition. That is true. However, in the case of a replacement child, you're having a special situation. You're having a situation where the archetype of death and the archetype of life present in an intertwined, enmeshed form, and particularly they present in reverse order. So if we are in the case of a child born or conceived, first there is an experience of death and the ripple effects of that in the family, in the parents. And then eventually comes with rising consciousness an experience of life, of its own budding life. So we are having something where it's intertwined. We are having the archetypes of death and life, and these will probably find expression in the unconscious and bear out in life in some difficulties. When a human being is expected to replace, to actually be a revenant, somebody who's coming back, she or he is not meant to be herself or himself. Not only that, they are meant to be somebody who is no longer living. They are meant to be a dead person. So you can see that there already also that element flows into it. In the UK, the situation at present is, these are statistics from Tommy's, SANS and Embrace and another NGO are doing fantastic work with bereaved parents to help them to have again a child. Now they said that about 5,000 babies a year are lost. 1 in 4 pregnancies ends in miscarriage in Great Britain, in the UK, and 9 babies are stillborn every day. About 3,000 stillborn and 2,000 who die in the first 4 weeks. So this is something that happens today. This happens every day in the year. So there are new replacement children born. But what I need to say is not every child born after a death is a replacement child. This is very important. Not every one of these babies who may be born after these is a replacement child. This will depend on many factors. Last, not the least, on the personality structure of the parents, on whether the parents have grieved and can see the child as a new child and not need to see the new child as a child who takes away grief. It depends on the projections the parent may have with respect to the new child. And it may also depend on the structure of the replacement child, her or himself, later on, whether they take on projections or whether they try to individuate and differentiate themselves from the projections, or whether they identify with the missing other in order to replace. So you have it from two directions, either projections received from the outside or identification from within with such a situation. Now, in this multi-layered, very complex condition, which I have tried with concepts to sort of look at from different angles so that we can intellectually comprehend it, there are several areas that are centrally important. The first one is that this will affect identity, right? Who am I if I'm supposed to replace? Am I myself or am I someone else? Am I here instead of somebody else? And rarely somebody will come into the office and say, I'm someone else, because a lot of people don't even know that these were the circumstances of their coming into existence. Or they may know some of the facts and don't know the consequences of this, because there can be lifelong consequences. So this was a boy on the schoolyard, actually, of your school, who wore this t-shirt. It was kind of provocative. And it spoke to me because it just expresses this idea, I'm not me, I'm someone else. Do you recognize this man? Yes, you do. So this is Peter Sellers, but actually this is Richard Henry, known as Peter Sellers. And he's famous for his roles in Pink Panther and Kermit the Frog, theater performances, very, very many productions. Now, Richard Henry was born to vaudeville entertainers on September 8th, 1925, near Portsmouth, and he died only aged 54. And his parents called him Peter, the name of an older, stillborn brother. When he was acting, he became the person he was portraying. When he wasn't acting, he was Richard Henry playing the role of Peter. His multiple roles were masks. Mr. Sellers liked to claim, describing himself basically as a character actor. As far as I'm aware, he said, I have no personality of my own whatsoever. I have no character to offer the public. When I look at myself, I just see a person who strangely lacks what I consider to be the ingredients for a personality. If you ask me to play myself, I would not know what to do. I do not know who or what I am. In Kermit the Frog, somebody asked him, he was asked to be himself, and he replied that, you see, my dear Kermit, that would be altogether impossible. I could never be myself, you see, there is no me, I do not exist. Hence, the idea that the process of individuation that was stipulated by Jung, that was a central part of his work, is the way forward to find out who I am, and the first step in that will be I am a replacement child, and then to discover who I am really underneath the projections or the self-identifications. What is the inviolable, unique self within me. There are many famous replacement children. I have a short list here. Yesterday night we added to the list. You may know people to add to the list. Famous creative people, because creation is one way to counter the destructive beginnings. Beethoven, Maria Callas, she replaced a boy and her mother didn't want to see her when she was born. Salvador Dali, I will speak about him a bit, Vincent van Gogh, Kierkegaard, Munch, Margaret Mead, Eugene O'Neill, Elvis Presley, and I said just about Peter Sellers, and last night, of course, one of the members brought to our attention again, James Barrie, who wrote Peter Pan, is a replacement child. Many famous replacement children in psychoanalysis in the first history, Sigmund Freud, Gustav Jung, Carl Gustav Jung, I will speak about him. François Dolto, Andre Green has an important concept to offer. I think Sigmund Freud and Carl Gustav Jung actually fell out with each other because they projected mutually what lay in their unconscious, which was connected to the replacement child. The research on this started with survivors and children born to survivors after the Holocaust. 6 million Jews were murdered by the Nazis in the 2 world wars. Millions of people died, and millions of replacement children were made. We are not only talking about replacement children today that we might be here in this room, that are born today. We're talking about something that is transgenerationally transmitted. We're talking about history. I was a replacement child mother to my 2 sons. Chris is here. If you want, you can speak about it later. So there was the first article in 1964 that appeared called On Replacing a Child. And thankfully, this professor is still alive, and he gave me a foreword to my book, for which I was very grateful. He is a Freudian psychoanalyst. I've taken into account a lot of Freudian research, and I think we can bridge concepts from both schools to understand this better. Rahel Yehuda and others have shown that on the DNA there are traces across 3 generations, proven traces of trauma and violence. There is a methylation process on the DNA that changes, and that explains genetically how this can be passed on, how this can be transmitted. There are other models that explain why the suffering from the replacement child can be transmitted across several generations, and sometimes take several generations to be seen and to be addressed.